dāmas un kungi, Tobias Rylander.
Hi guys. Guess I have the microphone here and a microphone stand, so I have something to hold on to. I guess I don't know how many of you know who I am, so I'll try to explain to you who I am and why I ended up in a stage in Latvia all of a sudden. I'm sorry, I need the microphone stand to hold on to because I get very nervous. I'm not very used to be on stage, but I'm very used to be off stage and at front of house. And have been for the last 20 years. I started my career in Sweden when I was 18 years old after having graduated music school. I studied music, classical trumpet was my main instrument. And I was very, very tired of music when graduating. Moved to Stockholm and started to hang out in a local rock club in Stockholm called Café 44, which is sort of the equivalent to the CBGBs in New York City. A very left-wing alternative rock stage. Having nothing to do and befriending the sound engineer, I started to operate, I think it was a 088 Frog console with 2 6-bars and 12 dimmer channels, and completely fell in love, just by the fun of it. From there, I kind of had to figure out what this thing was with lighting. And they gave me free hands to do whatever I want, as long as it didn't cost anything, as per usual. So I tried to figure out and find out what these things called lights were and where could you find them. And this surge brought me out to the subskirts of Stockholm and to a company called Spectra. It doesn't exist anymore, but at the time, it was one of the biggest rental companies in Sweden, and in Scandinavia, I think. So my search took me out to Spectra, and basically, they couldn't keep me away. I just stayed at the warehouse asking silly questions, and asking them to teach me about DMX. How does it work? Why is it this way? And also asking for free stuff. Bulbs. I needed bulbs for my local rock club. And this led to them actually eventually offering me an internship. So I started to work for free, winding cables and polishing S4 lenses till my fingers bled. And basically learning from the ground up of how to coil a cable by rolling your thumb, to don't use too much PVC tape when you tape it together, and how to use a dimmer rack, which eventually gave me a full-time job at the warehouse. And my curiosity and naivety didn't stop there. I stayed late nights, learning how to program consoles overnight, building my own little lighting rigs before morning came, where they had to be gone and done for the new workday. And this eventually was acknowledged by a man called Ola Melsig, that I'm sure some of you know. He's the technical director for a lot of the Eurovision Song Contests at the time. So eventually that's where I ended up. At Spectra, out doing gigs, a couple of Eurovision Song Contests. Later, as a lampy, climbing the trusses, soldering cables. During this whole time, though, I stayed true to my local rock clubs, doing my own gigs, which eventually led to me getting to know a lot of the rock bands in Sweden. So I'm gonna start to do some slides just so I remember what I'm talking about. So this brought me to doing all these gigs in the local rock clubs while also working daytime at Spectra. Some of these rock bands eventually started noticing that it was really fun to be on stage while I was doing light. And I felt the same. So some of them asked me to come on tour with them. And those bands were bands like the Sahara Hot Nights, the Helicopters, and Millencolin from Sweden. And back in those days, you didn't tour with a console or a lighting rig, you just toured as the lighting guy. So that was me for a couple of years, just touring with the band on the bus, showing up to the stages, festival stages, sometimes headlining really big festivals, but you showed up without a show file and without a console, and you just had to learn how to program all the consoles that you could ever encounter, which has proven to be a really, really good school and a really, really good asset. Later in my career, when becoming a designer, having winded those cables, polished those S4 lenses, and knowing how to program every console that there was. I'm not saying that I know that now, but at the time, as a designer, it's a really, really good asset to know what you're asking from your programmers and from your crew. You're never asking for the impossible, and when they say no, you can call bullshit, basically. Eventually, this led into me touring internationally. My first North American tour was with a band called Fever Ray, and later with Lykke Li. I swapped from being on the Whole Hog 2 console to Grand MA1. Again, still not really knowing what I was doing. I didn't even know that lighting designer was a job or a working title at the time. But as I started to tour North America, quite quickly, I was introduced to the fact that in North America it's a big deal to be a lighting designer. And I befriended people like Corey Fitzgerald and Roy Bennett. But I was touring, operating, programming for a couple of years with bands like Lykke Li, or artists like Lykke Li, Fever Ray, and Mike Snow. And doing so, as the only, still doing the lighting myself, flipping the lights, plugging them in, doing the electricity and all of that stuff, I was quite quickly actually recognized by Corey Fitzgerald and Roy Bennett and people in the lighting industry at PRG and a couple of big names in the rental industry who actually introduced me to Corey and Roy. Here are some pictures of Fever Ray. Again, I was touring with nothing. In Sweden, we have a saying, making magic with your knees, and that's exactly what we did every day. I don't know if you have the same here, but the tour that made me a name in the North America was Fever Ray, where I was traveling with 12 dimmer channels, 12 old grandma lights, not Grand MA, but Grandma, living room lights, and 2 lasers. And that year, I think it was 2009, it was the big talk, because it was very, very dramatic and basically nothing. Easy to tour with and very, very impactful if you have enough smoke. Just some pictures about basically how I think I made myself a name, and that was, again, traveling with nothing and doing a lot with little. With Mike Snow, for instance, on your left is the Blob, which is basically a big analog synthesizer where I ripped apart a couple of sun strips and wired them to old lighting bulbs myself on the spot. And with Lykkeli, it was always just about the drama. I've never really been a big tech guy, but I've had to learn. It's not my main interest. My main interest has always been the visual expression and the drama that you create with lighting. So sometimes I prefer almost to have really strict limitations. A lighting rig of 12 tar cans, maybe with 6 dimmer channels, is one of the most fun lighting rigs that I can work with. I love those challenges, and I think that what developed my ability for lighting design. As you might notice, I haven't studied a day in my life. I don't know if the signal is dropping out on the screen, but it's flickering down here. I haven't studied lighting design, not a day in my life. My school was Café 44 in Stockholm, and making the most out of basically nothing, learning how to play with shadow play and contrast. I have a huge interest in physics and the physics of lighting, and basically doing the most out of nothing. Random pictures. So, touring with these Scandinavian bands led me to North America. And at one point I had 5 active O2 visas in my passport, which you could have at that time. It wasn't very common, and they always questioned it at the borders. But this led me basically to stay in New York City, the big city, and hanging out with the big boys in the boiler rooms, and making my career from there, just basically starting over from where I was at Café 44 in Stockholm. Basically, I did exactly the same thing when I ended up in New York City, hanging out at local rock clubs, getting to know the bands, starting from scratch, with a huge amount of naivety and excitement. This led me to start touring with bands like The Strokes, Phoenix, the XX, which was, I dare to say, in somewhat the first kind of bands and tours that gave me a little budget and maybe a tech and a little crew to help me set up the lights. And I quite fast realized how much more you could do with a little bit of crew and lighting. I think The Strokes was one of the first bands where I used video. As you can see on the right screen there, I had 3 video strips run through a Green Hippo video server, which I stayed true to this day. I still use them, but I use the video screens, the projectors, and the servers as a very expensive gobo light, as you will see coming up. Touring with the Stroke or with the XX was when I really took working with video as my main lighting source. I think that I got the idea and started playing with the idea of using video projection as my main lighting source from a movie called Inglourious Basterds, where they made a whole thing. I tried to find it online, but there was so much Nazi references in the videos, I didn't want to put it on the screens. But basically, where they burned down the theater, you can see the projector beams in the smoke, and her face laughing in the smoke, and thought that was really cool. And so did a lot of other people, and I quickly learned that you can't project onto smoke, but it looks pretty cool when you do it as a volumetric or an aerial effect. So I did this design, I think it was in 2011, with the XX, where I had 3 or 4 back projectors as the main lighting source, as you can see behind these silhouettes. And those are 3 projectors, and they were the only spotlights that I had in the show. And I ran these very organic micro photography, organic footage through the Hippo, through the servers, and programmed it just like a moving light with a very expensive gobo. We also did project on smoke, but we realized that we needed to control the smoke. And that's where we filled this glass X, as you can see on the bottom right. We actually filled it and pressurized it with smoke, so we could fill it and empty it of smoke, so it became an opaque or a translucent, transparent fixture that we could project onto using the same fixtures that we used for aerial projection. This design brought me to really big venues in the US. We ended up doing a really legendary show at the Park Avenue Armory in New York City, where we took this to a really big scale. I think that we had 9 40K Barco projectors doing the main lighting system. And at that time, those projectors were really big. They're like a small car, basically. But it was super effective on a really big scale. And again, we used it both for projecting onto fabric as a projected image, but the end result and the idea was to use video as the lighting source, both for key light and for volumetric aerial projection. As you can see here, this is basically the same image, just on the bottom right, you have the image of the projection onto the side walls that later dropped like a magnetic kabuki drop and became the aerial video. Again, a very expensive but effective gobo. I took this concept further. I might have skipped a couple of slides. During this time, again, I'm skipping back and forth a bit. This basically was acknowledged in the touring industry, and eventually, after a couple of years in New York City, I was introduced to Roy Bennett and Corey Fitzgerald, some of the biggest and best, in my opinion, still designers in the world. And together, the 3 of us formed 7 Design Works in New York City. I think this is 2012. And quite soon after that, all 3 of us moved to Los Angeles and started office and studios in Los Angeles. Which led me to my 10 years with a band called the 1975. Still very, very dear friends of mine, but how I ended up with this band was they wanted a 9 Inch Nails show, and they reached out to Roy Bennett. And please, we're a small pop band from the UK, but we want to look like 9 Inch Nails. Can you please make us look like 9 Inch Nails? And Roy said, no, I cannot make you look like 9 Inch Nails, but here's my friend Tobias Rylander. Let him give it a try. And at that time, in the band's history, they're a very, very visual band for the people who doesn't know them. They're very conceptual in all their ideas and how they do things. it's outstudied, thought out. And at that band, they were very monochromatic, black and white. So we knew they wanted a black and white and very stylistic show. And having just done all these volumetric, organic projection shows, I immediately had this idea because I wanted to do a very linear and graphic architectural show with using light, still using video as the main lighting source. So that's how we brought the ideas of still doing back projection as the main lighting spots. They were touring small clubs, theaters. This is before they started doing arenas, and before I started doing arenas. But still, the only lighting source for this tours was actually some side lighting with clay package Sharpie washes or whatever it was. All the lighting was done using 5 back projectors. I think there were 20K Barcos at the time. And these 5 frames made out of what at the time was the VER blade single pixel lighting frames. So again, I pushed the idea and stayed true to the idea of let's try to control all the lighting and use Green Hippo as basically, again, a very expensive gobo light, but also a way to program front light. Oh yeah, the front light in this show was also projectors, where we projected on and did live masks and basically just mapped out. Instead of focusing a light, we had a full stage, full proscenium image, and all we did to focus lighting basically was to move live masks, positive and negative segments of lights around on stage. It's very limiting, but then again, that's really how I enjoyed working. I think that I have a couple of, again, remember this is 2013, so cell phones and cameras were not very good at the moment. But here you can see samples of basically no eye candy light going on whatsoever. Everything is video and run through Green Hippo video servers. And it's just very graphical video segments that we use for lighting output. And I really love, still do, I still use them as basically programming video to me has always been and should be like programming lighting. Of course, it's easier for me where I'm the one designer in the room. I don't have to fight with the video designers or whoever's making claims to the space and the brightness of video screens, because I tend to control everything myself. But I think it's a super useful tool still to this day to program the whole show in a very coherent way where everything is tied together. Lighting becomes video, video becomes lighting, and you don't have to fight about who needs to show most or whatever. It all becomes part of what actually looks really good. So here you can see, again, a very expensive gobo light, but very effective. How we just, in the video content, draw up white lights, white lines. It's basically just one white pixel drawing up a square back and forth. It's a very like theatrical way of using video. It's almost laser-like, but you have full control of every pixel of a whole stage. Again, we programmed all these shows on the Grand MA, running the Green Hippo as a lighting fixture. So you have full control of strobing, you have full control of intensity, color correction, and even effects. So yeah, what you're looking at here is the only light that you see here is a couple of side lights to show the band in front of 5 projectors and 5 frames of video product. But it's a full lighting show. Yeah, this show design was very effective, and the band was very happy with it, and so was I. So I kept working with the band and got acknowledged for the design, more appreciated internationally, and copied, as you always do get. Yeah, here are just a couple more examples of basically just white lines in a projector drawing itself up. And how we did that show. I do have, for all the shows that we're kind of gonna look at and go through, I brought this up because it was the very first show that we did for the 1975. I do have everything prepared if when we do the Q&A later, if you are interested in looking at a certain plot or renderings from a certain show, we can go back and look at them, but I'm not going to bore you with looking at drawings and plots at this moment. The next tour with the 1975, having learned myself how to program video as lighting, I wanted to take it a little bit further, going from just using projectors and single pixels as effect lighting, basically. I really wanted the whole stage to be immersed in light. And also, what was asked from the band this time, they were going to do arenas, but they wanted an art installation to be performed within. At the time, and we were very early with using James Turrell, which is a brilliant artist using light as his medium, we started to, again, knowing I wanted to run the whole show through a video system and program the video as lighting, as backward as it seems. I've never been a big fan of eye candy, so I like the fact of having a 1920 raster as my mind space and thinking of lighting in a theatrical way. I started to get a little bit more ballsy, but I still wanted to use side lighting was video, front lighting was video projection, and backlight was, in this case, a big video screen. And there was a lot to learn, because you had to learn everything about video. And if you think of video screens, as I'm sure a lot of you know, every pixel in a video screen is a lighting source. Whether it's projection or if it's a video screen, but there is a whole science of it, and we've spent nights and nights and nights debating about it. But here are just a couple of examples of my research that then spent over many years. No one had, for instance, made a 90-degree corner of LED screens. It didn't exist. So we spent months and months and months researching what video product we could use. We ended up with a WinVision 9mm screen, mostly because it didn't have a heat shield, which is basically a lighting cap for the pixel for blocking the sun. It's an indoor screen. But what happens with all video screens is that you get this moire, it's called, these patterns when you move both vision and especially camera around at different angles. And still to this day, they're a little behind, in my opinion, on manufacturing screens that actually look good at more than 45 degrees angles. So a lot of research went into finding this video product that we ended up using for the next 10 years with the band. Again, also measuring the quality of light coming off the screen, but most of all, the quality of the screen at different angles, making three-dimensional lighting sources out of video used as your main lighting source. The tour was called I Like It When You Sleep. So you can see here a couple of examples. The blade frames from the first tour we reused and just hung them above the band. I'm all about reusing and being sustainable with my design, so I always try to reuse materials or products or anything purchased that we've done. But in this show, again, the only lighting that we really used was, we had some X4 bars, which was very exciting, but again, it was just some side light washes to make this band show and pop in between these lighting sources that were basically video product. No lighting fixtures to speak of, really, but there's a lot of light and a lot of color on this stage. Yeah, I'm sure we can come back to this show and talk more about it, but at the time it was kind of groundbreaking using video this way and programming it this way. But what we did, and what had never been done before, was that every side of these, we call them the quadralets, the columns, and the frames were basically programmed as one output of the media servers, which we always, and of course, needed a couple of layers too to be able to do white hits as strobe lights, and color corrections and intensity chases, etc. So there's a lot of layers and a lot of hippos, but each side of these columns and each side of these rectangles were basically, to me, a big LED wash light. So we can program pum 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 of each side of these, which is very, very exciting because it just opens up doors, and you don't have rendering time and video servers, and you're also not locked into a time code track, which everyone knows the band might change a couple of bars in a song and then the video content is ruined. But if it's a time code lighting cue, it's quite easy to shift and correct everything. So in that sense, for us, it was a really winning technique to make a video-driven show with a band that kept changing their minds. Yeah, like I said, and as you can see, James Turrell was a very big influence on this show. Here's a funny video clip of rehearsals. We also tried to be very funny with using it. But again, no lighting. And shows will take you new places. This being a very architectural show, unfortunately you can see the moire here, but we did end up putting it on a rooftop in Los Angeles where it fitted pretty well. And it can also make you win prizes. This is the show that gave me the Knights of Illumination award. Again, using video as lighting was the reason to this. Next tour, Bigger, Higher. And this is where we really got into what's really, really important these days and what drives the whole industry is video content, not as in video content, putting it on the screens, but content for people to put on their social media feeds. For the next tour, that's all we did. We created a cell phone-shaped show. So we went from horizontal to portrait. We knew that's how they hold their phones, that's how they're going to document it. And the show really needs to look good everywhere. So doing these shows, basically we founded an expression. I don't know if we were the first, but we were definitely some of the first, that it was basically in the industry called an Instagram-ready show, where we designed from the first meeting, we knew that we needed to look at it from all the latest cell phone cameras that were going to be used, and what frame rates that were used in these cameras, to not have flickering screens, flickering lasers, or more array for screens, etc. Funnily enough, we still had to use WinVision 9, which was by then a pretty old product, but it was still the best product for for cell phone documentation. We took, again, the same concept, stayed through all these tours, programming all the video surfaces, all the sides of these cubes. In this show, basically the gap in between these boxes is the same width as the columns of the previous show. So these cubes fill the negative space of the previous show. And again, we used the same technique to program all the video screens, our main lighting sources. All we added was some side lights just to make the band pop when we turned off the video. Same product, same techniques, basically the same show, just inverted, much, much bigger and more expensive. A couple of pictures from that show. You don't need much lighting when you have this much LED to play with. And just for fun, well, every picture that you've seen up until now is actually photos of the show, but for fun, I included a couple of renders of the same show. So this is where I went from touring with nothing, and in a couple of years, while also having the backbone of Corey Fitzgerald and Roy, you start making renderings and start understanding how important it is to sell ideas. So these are actually renders of the same show that we just saw. They're pretty good in my opinion, and really fun to look at. A quick stop at how I built my show dramatically. I'm sort of a dyslexic, and I never went to school, really. I don't read or write, and I'm not very organized, but I annotate. So all my shows I build in this basically scrambled timelines, where I put the whole show together. I annotate rather than write notes. I know how to write music, and this is kind of a visual way for me to remember things. This is basically how my mind works. They tend to be very cluttered and messy at the end of a tour or at the end of a rehearsal, but they're also quite fun to look at, and usually ends up in a frame on a band member's wall sometimes. Yeah. Staying with the 1975 and the nature of the band asking me to do something completely different. they asked me to bring theater to the arenas. So we decided, in the nature of the band, to do something completely different from what we had done before. So I was asked to design a theater stage that was tourable for arenas and big outdoor theaters, which became the Still at Their Very Best show, which is now a big mishmash, basically, again, of all the other shows. But it started with this house that we designed for the band to perform within. It's always about having an art piece, basically, to perform within. I'll skip through some of these sketches. And this is ended up the stage that they toured on. There's not much video screens going on here, as you can see. And that's because we hadn't implemented the full show yet. The whole house was monochromatic white, because down the line we knew that we are implementing video projection as the main source of front light and video screen as the set extension of the back screen. Still very efficient, and we kept the language of the show the same. I'll see if I have any pictures. I don't, I'm sorry. Basically, what we ended up doing for this tour that has just opened in the US is that we're bringing back the video screen as set extension behind the house and front projection as a source of front light to color and give texture to the monochromatic white house. I'll skip through. Using video as lighting also have given me a lot of opportunities with companies like Volvo, where they've asked me to design concept studios showing their cars. Here are a couple of examples how I just hang video screens and use panoramic video screens as a perfect soft light, again using Green Hippo as a way to just program and color correct video screens. And as you can see, it's still kind of James Turrelli when you look at it in a green and shaped light. But so again, a perfect way of lighting up a car perfectly without any light in the lighting rig. A couple of examples of the different sets. I also became a set designer somehow, which can be very confusing, but very fun. I really do enjoy designing every physical part of a show. Again, another example of using video as lighting. I designed the most recent Loreen Eurovision Song Contest winning number, where the whole idea was to, again, use video screen as the main source of light. These are pictures from the festivāli.Nesen in Sweden, which is the pre-selection for Eurovision Song Contest that she won in Sweden, where we're basically using video floor as the bottom light, a video ceiling as the top light, and all we did for key lighting here was to shoot a little bit of a very framed profile light in between these two, basically big video sources. Doing this, you have to, again, video products are so sensitive to color correction. Since you often see them on camera, they're actually perfect lighting instruments as well. You have full control of color correction, CTO, CTBs. It's the same language. It's just a little backwards when you have to talk video to light the stage, basically. I hope some of you saw this show. It's pretty good. It was better in Sweden than in Eurovision Song Contest. That's a little bit about me. Thank you. Thanks. I think that we have a little Q&A planned, if anyone's got questions. And like I said, I have a couple of the plots and everything ready to show if there's anything that you really want to see. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer some questions. Those microphones are fun.
Oh, yeah. Want to try?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, my name is Michael. And one little question. You said that you designed, you tried to design everything by yourself. And what about video content for your screens, for your installations? Do you make the video as well?
That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. Is there any way to get more of the audience microphone on stage? It's a little hard to hear. It's a great question, and I had no idea how to do that when I started, which is also why a lot of the shows were very plain and monochromatic and square and architectural to start with. I had no idea how to do that. And like with everything else, I basically, just like going to Spectra looking for a DMX cable, I just started asking around who can actually do these things. So for the first 1975 show, when it was just white lines drawn as volumetric projections, I just found someone who could make a white line draw itself into a square. And that's how I got introduced to design houses and realized that there are actually companies making video content for shows. But I do not manufacture or make any video content myself, apart from very few times when we've done organic stuff and just filmed it, like with the Access we did. Basically microfilming, nail polish, remover drops in different oils and stuff, and documented it that way because we knew that we wanted to put that on the screen. So, great question, but I do not manufacture any content myself, but in all shows that I design, as a full creative, I oversee the process of all the content creation, basically. And you ask different talents. Making video content is as creative as making a movie sometimes. So you go to certain people that you know have the ability and the craft to do what you want, whether it's photographic content or if it's very animated or Unreal Engine driven or etc. Thank you.
One more question in that aspect, then. It's me, the same. You mentioned this Unreal Engine and all this, what do you think? Do you somehow prioritize maybe the old school, like the 2D video shootings, like in this 2D area, or you try to experiment with this virtual reality things with Unreal Engine? Do you think you will be implementing this AR things in your works in future?
We're definitely implementing it more and more. It's a little bit of a tricky situation, and it all depends on the creative of the end result, what the end goal is with the show. It's one of the biggest budget posts of a production these days is usually video content. Video content can be 4 times more expensive than all the light, all the video screen, and the trucks on a tour. It all depends on what you want to do. But the ambition these days is pretty high, I would say. So we're definitely implementing it more and more, and we're seeing a lot of maybe lighting budget even going into the video content creation process.
Could you tell us a bit more about pre-programming, how you pre-program the show? You're using some kind of visualizers where you can expect some nice beams in the fog environment when you do pre-programming, or you are using, for example, shape that I included in the Green Hippo, or what? Any other software?
Yeah, we definitely do a lot of pre-visualization, especially recent days of shows that I'm not really allowed to talk about, but we use a lot of Depends 2, and now even 3, mostly also because it renders volumetric projection beams out of video content, which is unbelievable and so cool to see how that's actually developed. But you can actually now see virtually the volumetric beams coming out of a projector lens using the video content and the smoke setting that you have chosen. But yes, we definitely do pre-visualization, and we usually do it in Depends because of the fact that we can do both lighting and video in the same environment. So we plug lighting console and video server into the same system and still use video as a big lighting source, basically.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, up in the back, I think.
Hi, thank you for sharing your experience. My question is, if I understand correctly, that right now you are still doing these shows from the idea till the show on a daily basis, right? Then my question is, can you run through these steps from idea till show, and which part of it is your favorite one?
Sure. I would say the process is as individual as the artist is. But me being an artist as well, and consider myself an artist, my process is always, it starts with a meeting with the artist to kind of get the idea of who they are, what they want, and most importantly, what do they want to communicate to the audience? What do they want to make them feel? Do they want to create an immersive, inclusive kind of experience for the audience, or do they want to create a theatrical piece where the audience are only spectators, basically? And it usually starts there, and I usually set up a Dropbox system, basically, where I have my own in Tobias inspirational images, and then the artist's inspirational images. And it can be anything from pictures of architecture to paintings, or links to YouTube clips of stuff that they think is really visually striking or important. But I also always look really closely at what the visual identity already is of the artist, who they are, how have they shown themselves to their already established fan base, and is there a red thread throughout their artwork campaigns, and is there a current artwork campaign that can be used visually, like have they done the artwork for the record that's coming out, and is there something there that we want to kind of translate into the physical world of the touring shows? So that's a really big one. We also try to find a visual language for the artist that translates in scale, which is really, really important, meaning you need to find a concept that is strong enough visually that anyone can recognize it and relate to it, and connect it to the artist, not only the artist, but also to the campaign. I always say that to be a successful design, it needs to be recognizable by thumbnail, which basically mean that even before clicking on the link on YouTube, you know that that was the 1975-2014 tour, because it looks like it and it's got that color scheme. Even better if they should also know what song they're clicking at, because it needs to be so visually identifiable, I guess is the word. So yeah, that's more or less the process. I also tried, it's really important to make it scalable so that you can basically bring a color scheme, a physical aspect to it, and a visual identity down to playing a small club to basically headlining a festival. You need to have a color scheme and a visual identity to the show that you can scale down to almost nothing, but still stay true to the visual identity.
Thank you. And what do you enjoy the most in the process or result?
The process, I would say. I'm always left with a little bit of what I call post-production stress syndrome. It's basically when you've been working so hard for a year, developing something and giving a lot of both energy and soul and emotion to a creative process, and then you have a couple of premiere shows and then it's over. It's very, very gratifying, and it's a great feeling to have a premiere show. And you're usually high on that feeling, but for 24 hours, and then you're left with a big void. So I definitely like the process more than the result.
So yeah, hi. I had another question here. Do you think that currently, with the situation like in the industry market, is it mandatory to have multiple soft skills? What I mean is that, for example, you want to become a professional in like the lighting, scenography, but to get to that point with so many people, I don't know, applying to the same position, that is kind of mandatory to have multiple skills in different areas, like lighting, video, other stuff to get into the industry?
That's a really good question. If I understood it correctly, was the question if you need multiple set skills to make a career in the industry?
Yes, about that.
I don't think so. It certainly helped me a lot, but it's also the reason why I started to do set, video, and lighting was basically being very, very naive and a little ballsy, I would say. I've stepped on a lot of toes getting to where I am, not because I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do everything and I wanted to control everything. And it's also, we live in a world where everything has started to kind of merge together. Like, as you can see in my shows, video and lighting, they're not two different departments. I need to have the knowledge of video to make my lighting look good, and I need to and vice versa. It also obviously doesn't hurt to have designed the set in which you're trying to light or project video onto it, because you've had the whole process in mind the whole time. So it definitely doesn't hurt. It's a big asset, but most of all, I think that it's an asset in understanding with the other department that you're talking to. I'm not always gonna end up designing shows where I have full control. Like with Beyoncé now recently, I was not doing concept, I was not doing video, I was doing lighting, because lighting is where I come from and I'm a lighting designer. but it definitely helps for me to have the full knowledge of how to program a video server, what it takes to develop video content, how time-consuming it is to do video content to a time code track, for instance, or having the knowledge of programming time-coded show lighting and then changing the track, but also knowing the set building companies, to know what their capabilities are, what the materials they use, and the lead time of how long it takes to build a custom-built video screen frame. All of that kind of really comes together, and it's becoming very blurry of what the assignment is sometimes, which I like, but I don't think that it's something that you necessarily really need to master to be, for instance, a lighting designer. There will always be the need of a lighting designer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cool.
Okay, then I have a question.
All right.
I have a very loud voice, so probably I don't need this, but anyways. So can you tell us, I wrote down, so I'm stressed as well. So what is the latest tour you did in USA? And what are the biggest challenges in those tours?
The latest tour was actually to do the set extension tour of the 1975 Still at Their Very Best, which is that theatrical set piece house that we did, but where we added a set extension video screen behind it to do clouds and get depth to the screen, and also adding the front projection and all that. But I also did the latest Beyoncé Renaissance World Tour as a lighting designer.
What were the challenges there?
There are many of them.
Like just some.
Budget has become a really big challenge, it seems. Coming back from the pandemic has completely changed the industry, I dare to say. Nothing is what we used to know, I would say. We're these days, we're thinking a lot about how many trucks, rigging times. We're much more limited to that, but that's also a big aspect of what I really like to implement into my shows, is to be sort of carbon dioxide footprint aware. It's like we're seeing the biggest tours on the planet tour all of the planet. No one's really talking about the carbon dioxide footprints of having 24 trucks of LED screen, and but it's definitely something that we're thinking about a lot, and should be thinking about. It's a lot. Me and a lot of other designers are trying to make it cool to, instead of bragging how many trucks you're actually putting on the road, you should brag about how few trucks you're putting on the road. So that's a big challenge, and that's something new that we're trying to make cool, basically.
Okay, and then one more question. So we have a lot of students here, right? And I know that you moved to USA. How old you were when you did that? And what was that opportunity that brought you to USA?
I think that I was 22, and the opportunity was that I started doing all these North American tours with Scandinavian bands like Lykke Li, Mike Snow, Fever Ray, Shout Out Louds, The Helicopters, you name it. And back then, you can't do it now, but back then I needed an O2 visa for each act. So my passport was full of O2 visas in the United States. And I also had sort of relative and family friends that lived in New York City. A half-sister who also happened to be married to one of the record producers of the Strokes. So I was I had a really good opportunity to start hanging out with some cool kids in New York City, and I took it. So my first apartment in New York City was actually managed by the Strokes manager. Just hooked me up with an apartment in Lower East Side. So my time in New York City, and I'm not kidding, it's like I've literally made my career in a boiler room in New York City, just like in the good old rock and roll days.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
Hi.
So you were talking about some musicians that were copying the stage.
Mm-hmm.
In music, it's quite simple when you know that there are some, copyright issues.
Yeah.
What about stage? Can you prove it? Are there any, lawsuits or something?
I think there used to be sort of a system where you could basically file your design works. You could hand in your plots and your drawings and everything. But no one really does that anymore. And I think that came more from theater and Broadway shows, where I think they probably still do it, and they could probably file a lawsuit if you copied a screenplay straight off. But there is nothing really in the entertainment and touring industry that says, like, that's gonna cost you if you do that. And unfortunately, some designers just are very, very ruthless and respectless, really, with copying shows, where they take a concept. My old friend and colleague Roy Bennett said, because I went up to him, he borrowed a couple of my ideas a couple of times, and I went up to him whining a little bit about it, and he said, Tobias, there are only so many conceptual ideas. And I guess that's true, but you sort of have to live with it, and what they say, the copying is the ultimate flattery. There isn't really nothing that you can do about it, but just know that you did it first, and just don't do it to others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Question about shows. A lot of your shows are super clean, but Meta Angel and...
I'm sorry, I cannot hear.
Oh, now? Better? Okay, we'll
there
try.
you go.
I'm here. Okay, thank you. A lot of your shows are super clean, but Meta Angel and Valorant was construction-based. It is on purpose or just style?
I'm sorry. Was that about Valorant?
Yep, Valorant and FKA Twigs Meta Angel show. There was a lot of constructions, sceneable constructions. It was on purpose or just a style?
It was definitely on purpose. In a very scenic way. I think in both those cases, I took the opportunity of using the aesthetic of an ongoing campaign or an aesthetic relation to what we were doing at the time and more or less grasped it. In the Valorant world, basically we made it grimy by using truss, and actually for the first time in my life using truss warmers. But that was only to enhance kind of a grimy way of getting scenery to a low cost. So making the most out of materials off the shelves. It was actually, in both cases, a sustainable decision that we made. In FKA Twigs, we used Mayer scaffolding as the main scenery parts because it was cheap and it didn't create any sort of landfill or residue or carbon dioxide footprint on the planet.
Hello, Tobias. Here. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
In your opinion, what has been the main driving factor or factors in your success, and what has brought you most satisfaction in your work?
It's interesting. We were talking about this last night. I think the driving force it's more or less naivety. I'm kind of naive, and like I said, it took the first 10 years of my career until I realized that, wait, lighting designer or conceptual designer is actually a quite important role in this industry, and it's pretty cool to be that. For me, it was just something that I really, really enjoyed doing, and I loved doing it, and I wanted to do it. So it's like you couldn't throw me on enough tours and challenges. But it took me a good 10 years to realize, like, oh, wow, wait, Roy Bennett is designing Paul McCartney, Lady Gaga, and Nine Inch Nails, and is making a lot of money doing it, and is very well respected. So I have to say that was never a driving force, but it is very gratifying once you get there and get recognition and getting the recognition of having really honest, creative ideas is very gratifying. So that's the biggest part of it for me, is like when someone acknowledges the fact that I had a really great idea.
Okay, I have again a question about Eurovision.
Yeah?
Have you ever been involved in Eurovision, like some festival content?
I mean, I have actually. Maybe I left it out in my talk, but during my years at Spectra, one of my first big productions that I was ever involved in as a lampy was Eurovision in Ukraine in 2005, I think it was. Ola Melsig brought me in. Back then I was little Toby in Sweden. And because of my petite size and naivety, I was always the guy that they sent up in the trusses to solder or glue, hot glue, thousands and thousands of fiber optic cables to a scenery piece or whatever. I was always that guy on those gigs. And I did work really, really hard. So I did a couple of Eurovision Song Contests like that, which also brought me into being, back then, sort of a little bit of an expert in wireless DMX, because it was just out. And I think that Eurovision in Kiev was the first time we used a fully wireless signal system for all the smoke in the venue. And I was in charge of that. And then there was a long gap of, I guess, more than 20 years. And last year I was asked to design Lorene's contributing song for Melodifestivalen in Sweden. So in between there was nothing involving Eurovision or Melody.
Hi. You mentioned concerns about sustainability on tour.
Mm-hmm.
How much of a gimmick do you think is Coldplay's approach on this tour with their danceable floors that generate electricity? Do they power something more than a light at front of house?
I can't really answer on how much of a gimmick it is. I do give them the kudos and respect for trying to talk about it. Everyone talks about it. Very few actually do what it takes. And actually, during the pandemic, I formed a group called Redefine Design, where I gathered, since none of us had anything to do, none of us knew if we were going to have a touring industry whatsoever moving forward. But I gathered a lot of the designer names and my colleagues that I knew, like Willie Williams and Corey Fitzgerald and Bass and Silent House Group and Sooner from Coldplay. And all of us, we spent one day a month in a Zoom meeting talking about these things. actually trying to talk about how we could change the industry to stop wasting so much, to be more efficient in truck packs, using less power, what kind of power to use. And it's proven it's very difficult. Art always comes with a price, whether it's on the planet or someone's pocket. It's basically always on the planet. But it's really difficult because what's been shown and proven is the biggest cost on the planet and the carbon dioxide footprint of a show it's not the show, it's the audience. It's the audience traveling to the shows that is actually the biggest carbon dioxide footprint of a tour. And second to that, it's the AC and the beer fridges of the arenas and the stadiums actually pull more power than the stage lighting and video combined. The AC is incredible for these venues. So it's really, really tricky. And then you can always debate how many trucks you need on a tour, but I think if we really wanted to change the touring industry to a more sustainable thing, we'd have to start looking at how we tour. And I think a big thing is going to be that the artists need to start playing more cities, smaller venues, and basically go back to do theater shows and make so many stops that the audience don't have to travel to see them. Because the biggest carbon dioxide footprint are the 70,000 people traveling into London each day to see Beyoncé for 5 nights, unfortunately.
Nu tad pēdējais jautājums, jo mums jāpārbūvējas nākamo pasākumu.
Okay, so my last it will be quick one.
All right.
Have you ever made any show here in Latvia?
I'm not sure that I have. I know that Licky Lee was here a couple of times with some of my shows, but the shows that I have been here for was actually before I started with lighting, when I was touring as a musician with a band called the Sons of Cyrus. We were playing some underground, very dark and cold rock clubs.
Here in Riga?
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the venue, but I was here as a very naive young boy playing the harmonica in a garage rock band.
Did you enjoy that?
I loved it.
And now?
Still love it.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Paldies, Tobiasam!
Thanks, guys.